Welcome to Beauties and Beasties, the independent pest podcast for the UK.
Hello. Look at this. A little bit of product placement here. How many times can we say the word beauties and beasties on one page?
Can I do my shameless plug now?
All right, go for it. Get it in early. Go on for it.
If anybody would like a t-shirt, please get in touch. I think we haven't decided yet. There's still a lot to be spoken about, but I think we're going to start selling a few t-shirts. Any money made will be put back into the podcast and the guests, not into us. It isn't going into our pockets. We never started this for money, and we will not do it for money. But if we can and we can do something for you or for the pest control industry, that's what we're going to do.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you want a t-shirt, we'll put them up online, reasonably priced, of course. And but yeah, to say any profits that we make, they'll go to paying for the platform, the StreamYard platform, and the platforms that we use for the podcast. And then anything left over, it'll either be a charitable donation or we'll think of something for the community, Pest Management UK, that we can do. So
Yeah.
Thoughts, chuck them in the comments. Actually, if you can think of something that we can do, it won't be a lot, but it'll be something we can give back. If you can think of anything, then yeah, let's.
And if you are a guest or have been a guest, get in touch with us because we'll have a t-shirt for you. But they get them on one condition, don't they, Al? And that is that we get some photos of you front and back. I don't know if anyone's seen this or not.
Oh,
can you see?
Hey,
like that. Is that good?
That's good. It looks good.
Yeah. I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Perfect. So right before we bring our guest on, Terry's asking, do we have to wear them while watching? And the answer to that, Terry, is yes. It's like a big cult. We'll all wear them at the same time every Friday night. Everyone puts their t-shirts on together and we'll join in the podcast because it's a gang, just not like a cool biker gang, like a really nerdy podcast gang. So there we go. Yeah. But no, can I tell you about my week? Because I have had the worst week of travel I have ever had in my life. It's so bad, it's actually a little bit funny.
Go on.
So can I please share this? On Monday, I was meant to sort of like head over to Hanover. So 2 trade shows this week, both in Germany. First one was in Hanover, Eurotier. So on Monday, Monday night, fly out to Hanover. Driving over there and trying to do the login on your phone, you know, the e-sign in on your phone. And the person saying, can't do, check in at front desk. So, okay. Get to Jasmine's been involved with all of this as well. But basically get to the front desk and they're like, oh, this is really weird. You don't have a seat allocated to your ticket. So here's just a sort of like a blank boarding pass to get you through security and go and speak to the people at the gate. So I get to the gate and they're like, oh, yeah. Basically, for every 100 seats that we have on a plane, we sell 102 tickets because we kind of expect people to not turn up. But would you believe it? Everyone's turned up today. So you don't have a seat. I was like, but I've just paid for a ticket. And they're like, yeah, you've paid for a ticket, not for a seat, mate. And that was it. So they shuttled me off to a hotel. So that was Monday. That was pretty bad. Ended up being 2.5 hours late to where I was meant to be in Hanover the following day. Coming back last night, get to the airport, get through security with Jasmine. Tannoy goes, your flight's now 1.5 hours delayed. Oh, okay, that's not the end of the world. It happens. But when we finally get onto the plane, there's 3 guys at the front, absolutely smashed, absolutely steaming, and one of them starts to have a nosebleed. To which point the captain's like, well, not really keen on putting you up into the air in a low pressure environment, so we're going to have to get you off. So another hour and a half sat on the tarmac, to which point we start to take off, and the whole captain turns around and he says, hey, well, just to let you know, London City Airport, because of the noise abatement, won't let us land now. We're too late. So we're going to have to divert. So in the air, while I've got no opportunity with my phone to try and make any travel plans, we divert from London City all the way over to Luton. So yeah, I found myself at Luton Airport at 12:30 at night, waiting for a lift. That's an hour and a half away. Didn't get home this morning until 3:30 in the morning. I mean, but that's the end of my travel now for the rest of it. That was 4 trade shows in 3 countries over 4 weeks, and honestly, never again. I am done. So yeah, there we go. Excellent stuff.
I've got something that a lot of the guys will be interested in, and will probably be able to give us some advice on. Got called to a job. The job is a parrot sanctuary. It has a massive house mouse problem. The parrots range in size from 40 grams to 1.5 kilos, and by all accounts, their whole life revolves around making everybody else's life difficult. They'll steal keys and unlock doors. There's already been a firm in, and they tried some sort of interactive trapping thing, but the parrots just smashed their way into the box and ate components of the traps out of them. And then they've decided that they are going to pull out. This firm's going to pull out for their own reasoning. When we were there, the mice were running over your feet. There is that many mice there, like that many mouse. Someone said this. Here's the problem. If a parrot puts its head up the trap, it's going to get killed. And some of these parrots are extremely expensive. And there's somewhere between 75 and 100 in the enclosure of different sizes. Remember, some of them will be as small as about the size of a budgie, lovebirdy, cockatiely type size. So it's not just about the trap, it's about stopping the animals getting in. But if you try to use anything plastic, they're going to break into it. If you try to use anything steel and the aperture's too big, the little ones are going to get in. So yeah.
Thanks, Hugh, for putting that in there. Don Babbage, the first budgie smuggler. So there we go.
I've thought about that, but let's have it. You're gonna have a think of it this week and help us out next week, because we are running short, and we are now. Go on, Al.
Oh, yes. So we're going to introduce our guest tonight. So we have another esteemed guest all the way over from the States, but this time a little bit different. And I won't ruin her thunder. I'll let her introduce herself, because very exciting guest tonight with a lot to talk about. So please, can we order to the stage? Mary Kate, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you both doing?
Oh, we're
very
good.
good.
We're good. Yes.
Awesome.
So I have to say, I met Mary Kate out for the first time actually in Pest World a couple of weeks back, and had a lovely. She was absolutely phenomenal. Put in contact with one of our previous guests, Stuart, who I'm sure is on tonight, and Mary Kate was absolutely phenomenal. She showed me around all the stands. She gave me all of the told me all about the American pest management industry, really sort of like chaperoned me. So yeah, I don't think I can thank you enough for that. That was a wonderful sort of like morning. It was really great. So thank you.
You're welcome. I still owe you a coffee, so there is that. I have not forgotten. So at some point, oh, there's Stuart. At some point, I'll have to pay you back for that. So thank you very much for having me. I enjoy your podcast immensely, and I'm extremely honored to be here. So thanks for having me.
Oh, excellent.
Well, you've got a lot of people come on to watch you.
Oh, absolutely. And to be fair, all future podcast, applicants, please, that is how we like to be addressed. With, as it should be how all people start the podcast. Oh, perfect. So, Mary Kate, obviously I've met you, but please tell everyone else listening a little bit about yourself. How did you get to be into pest management? Where did it all begin for you?
So my route into pest management definitely was a little bit of a weird one, and it's actually your bit about the parrot sanctuary is actually a fabulous segue, because when I was 15, still in high school, my absolutely wonderful mother was like, "You need to do something. You need to get out and do something." And so she had me volunteer at a zoo. I was living in Baltimore, Maryland, here in the States. So I was volunteering for the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. And I was working with zookeepers and all sorts of different wild animals. And that's when I started inadvertently and very much against my will having to get involved with pest control, because you can't have wild animals and all of their food and all of their waste without having some sort of pest component, as we all know. And so in that moment, I was like, oh, I want to be a veterinarian. And so I went to Colorado State University out in Fort Collins, Colorado, graduated back in 2013 with my undergrad. Vet school was off the table. I had to take organic chemistry, and that took a lot of wind out of my academic sails of, do I really want to study this for 4 more years? No, I don't. And instead then began working for local health departments in Colorado, moved on to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I was pretty much a health inspector or food scientist. I'm not sure what the term is in the UK, or maybe it's food officer. I'm having a moment.
I think the closest we have it is the environmental health officers, so EHOs. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So that's what I was doing, was predominantly food safety, but again, restaurants and pests go together from time to time. And so I did that for a number of years, and then made my way out to beautiful Boston, Massachusetts, where I now work at Harvard University as a senior environmental public health officer. So I'm not a pest control applicator. I offer guidance, suggestions, another set of eyes in terms of dealing with any issues, any building. When we build new buildings, we want to make sure that we're keeping everything, nicely well sealed and designed properly. I also do food safety, communicable disease control, and drinking water as well. And just the real quick disclaimer, I am a Harvard employee, but my comments and thoughts are definitely my own, and nothing that I'm talking about today is really reflected on them. I'm just speaking as Mary Kate Kenney. So just a full disclosure there.
No, that's great. And yeah, it's good to be able to sort of like just say that and speak your mind. But I want to cycle back to one thing really quickly, because you said something that you touched on that I've been having a couple of conversations with some colleagues and some friends and people around the world. And it's that concept of preventing pests before they start, especially with buildings and building management and building development, because that is something, I mean, certainly in the UK, very much overlooked. And I'm sure if I asked everyone on the chat right now to say, right, give me examples of where buildings have failed before they've even gone up, everyone would have a story where they found some failure actually in the foundations, in the fabric of the building. And it seems to be something that's so often overlooked, and I know for a fact it's not on the radar of the building codes or the building regulations that we have in the UK. It just doesn't factor. That the closest I think we have is that there's a little bit around drainage and a little bit about drain pipes, that they shouldn't be encouraging to pests, but there's no real guidance as to how to build a home or how to build a building that's from the ground up pest proof. And a lot of these problems start. So how do you actually tackle that? Is that something you just do on campus, or is that something you do all across the States, just give advice, new builds? I mean, so what's the States doing that we can probably learn from here?
So actually, my colleague, who has taught me so much, I learn from him every day. His name's Dr. Rich Pollock. He developed a fantastic construction IPM document that we give to all of our contractors, all of our folks doing construction on the university. And it's basically a how-to guide of securing penetrations, examining exterior structures, guidance for landscape design. Don't have trees too close to the roof. Don't have this, make sure all windows are screened. It's not something that is required by local municipalities, but it's something that we try to do to prevent these things from happening. Because I find in particular, there's a big disconnect between what we might see with an architect, and they have all these gorgeous designs and it looks beautiful and modern. And then you look at the very fine print, and the door that they want to use for their statement piece is not rated for exterior as an exterior door. because there's a huge clearance underneath. And that's when we want to try and prevent those problems as soon as possible, so we can maintain the vision of the building while keeping it pest proof.
Oh, so I feel that because I worked on a couple of projects when I was a consultant with train stations, and train stations are big buildings. And of course, you have to have a door big enough to fit a train into. Very hard to sort of like proof that gap. But they had a huge problem with pigeons. But not only that, they managed to compound this problem by having a huge glass fronted window to it, floor to ceiling, 3 stories high, beautiful. Looked, and you could see the architect's vision. It was meant to look like a cresting wave. It looked gorgeous, but really, in reality, they had just created one very big pigeon trap, because the pigeons flew in through the big glass doors and they could not figure out how to get out again. And it's fascinating, isn't it, how some of these issues, and Davey, who's just popped up and said good evening, he will probably, because Davey is very much all about the drains. He is Mr. Drains UK. And he will be able to tell you just some of the fundamental failures of, when drains are put into buildings, which is even before then. So that's good. Maybe talking about the zoo, maybe you could sort of like shed some light into Sean's issue. I mean, what would you do, having worked in a zoo with all of those animals before? What would be your first thoughts onto how to get rid of mice from an aviary, for our all intents and purposes?
I mean, my first thought is a cat, but that probably isn't going to work out well with the parrots, so probably not that. It was always fascinating, the differences between the different animals in terms of what would come in and what wouldn't, because you do have that overlay so much between the indoor enclosure and the outdoor enclosures. And, there are dedicated pathways to allow wildlife itself to come in and out. You want sunlight, you want fresh air, you want that environment to be as natural as possible. But sometimes that includes snakes and mice and things like that, even though they're not exactly welcome. I used to work a lot with the non-human primates, so I had a lot of chimps, lemurs, colobus monkeys, etc. And so we had mice for sure. But they definitely kept clear of the chimps after they found out that they are not going to survive an encounter with them. Their curiosity and just strength will, basically they turn them into a squeeze toy. So now what you want.
They went full Lenny on it. I don't know if you've ever read the book of Mice and Men. It's probably a very, very British school thing, but never mind. It was
maybe the little ones. It's the younger ones are more curious, but as they get older, they wouldn't have as much interest in the mice. But the snakes, they definitely would garner interest and attention in the worst way for them.
Absolutely. I used to have a friend who worked at a zoo in the UK. And they said they carried on getting rats in the giraffe enclosure, but it was a very short-lived problem because the giraffes would freak out and stamp on them. And basically, I was told by my friend that giraffes have an unnerving accuracy with their feet. So they'd come in the morning and there'd just be all of these pancaked rats on the floor of the giraffe enclosure. You've got to take some serious sort of like respect from that. You got a head that's all the way up in the cloud and feet that are all the way down there. The accuracy to be able to stamp on a rat as it runs past that's some fairly good going. So maybe actually, Sean, that's what you need, not cats. Maybe just get a giraffe. Yeah,
just a giraffe.
Just a whole whack-a-mole thing going on. Oh dear.
No, it's in all seriousness, that's definitely a conundrum. Sean, I'll noodle about this one over the weekend and try and think of anything good for you, because
I've been noodling about it I love that word now, noodle. That's my favorite word. I've been noodling it for about a week and asking lots of people. We've kind of come up with a solution in our heads, but I don't want to stifle other people's thoughts if they're going to come up with. Terry mentions a multi-catch trap. I just think the problem is so big that you're not going to deal with it. Like, I know everyone thinks the problem's big until you're there. I think trapping is pissing in the wind. Well, to put it into context, they had 65. First of all, you can't use traps where the little birds can get in, because obviously it'll break the neck. So I don't want to go into the major details of it. But they had these specific traps in, and they had 65 of them. and every single one was being filled within 24 hours. They were emptying them 3 times a week, and after however many weeks they give up. So they're killing 200 mice a week for weeks, and they haven't touched the sides. They are still running around in numbers over my feet. Like, not when I say over my feet, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you stand still in there, you are waiting seconds before you see them run.
Are they eating the food that drops from the parrots? Like, is that what their primary source is?
Yeah. They've basically built the best mouse heaven in the world, haven't they? Because they've got a food supply, loads of harborage. It's perfect for them. It's a 6-inch concrete floor with 6 inches of substrate on top of it for the birds, for this enrichment. You can't get the birds out because some of them are so flighty with it being a sanctuary. If you try to catch them, they drop down dead. You know, they're like, because they're just so stressy, aren't they? Some of them are like, they've come from, they're just wild, you know, like that. Like, so removing all the birds and removing all the stuff isn't an option. And you're like that, like,
Can you not partition it off? Can you not put partition? Like, can you not put a partition in it? The same fabric that they use to make the walls, make a partition in there and basically just do the majority of your treatment within the partition, like a bubble of space.
Honestly, like, if you are there, you'd be like that. Like, you're gonna have to hit the whole thing. It is black with them. And when I say black, I mean black. The only good thing is, which I don't know if Mary's aware of or not, the house mice. And over here, we only have one poison approved for field mice, which would limit us, although it's probably going to come into being used in this in some way, shape or form after the clearing's done. But it means that we have a lot more strings to a bow dealing with them, because if it was field mice, I think we'd just be pissing in the wind. But you don't tend to get field mice in them numbers, do you? I've never seen them like that, have you?
No, I've never seen them get that big. I mean, even in granaries when they get in there, I've never seen a field mouse population rival a house mouse population for sure. That's it. I met some of your field mice in the States, actually. They're a lot prettier than our field mice. The little white-tailed deer mice, I think they are.
Are they big?
A little bit bigger than a field mouse, only a tiny bit.
But just a tiny bit. They can show up in incredible numbers. I did have a couple of interesting cases out in Colorado where we, would have, unfortunately, Colorado, as Alex, you saw, is incredibly dry and arid, and the weather can change on a dime. And so every now and again, you do get cases of hantavirus in kind of the southwest region of Colorado. Yes, Hugh. They can carry it, and so every now and again you'll get a human case. Unfortunately, it has a very high mortality rate, so often someone who gets it may not survive the encounter, and then it's a big investigation, lots of hazmat suits, and the spaces that we sometimes go into would be just a mess of droppings, or it would be cleaned so thoroughly that it just reeks of bleach in the aftermath. So
what's your average everyday job then that you would do? Like, what's your bread and butter work?
I'd say my bread and butter work is food safety and pest control combined. So being a former health inspector, I definitely, had wonderful folks training me, but it wasn't until I got to Harvard that I realized, while working with Rich Pollock and some folks with the city of Cambridge and elsewhere, I'm like, man, I did not know enough as an inspector to make good recommendations and to give people the best advice. Like, that's so critical. Because a lot of times, restaurants are either 100% leaning on their vendors, which is excellent. And I, trust the experts, absolutely. But every now and again, if they have a technician who's not sure themselves, or maybe is, not giving the best advice, then the problem just persists and persists. And then I take them into enforcement, and then I wind up on the news. Unfortunately, we have an Open Records Act here in the US. And when in my time in Colorado, the news loved to pick up inspections that had lots and lots of violations or salacious headline articles like, "Oh, rat found here," and "Mice overrun bakery." So it's, that was a very eye-opening experience. But food safety and pests together are definitely what I spend 90% of my time doing.
That's awesome. Go on, what are you thinking, Sean? Because I've got something, but what are you thinking?
So you touched on something which we find over here about like being able to give those good recommendations. Like if you were a pest controller and you were dealing with a job and like our version or AHO, you didn't think we're giving very good recommendations. So I don't know, say over here we would probably, I would guess most people would just bait and trap for cockroaches, low-level cockroach infestation, especially with the Germans. And you can make a whole world of hurt for yourself spraying. But you'll get it where they'll say, "Oh, we think you should be spraying these," and you think, "Oh no, that's terrible." How would you recommend a pest controller deal with that to get them both on the same song sheet, so that you're moving forward positively rather than antagonistically, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. And it's a tricky position that you guys are in terms of, they hired you. They are your client. You want to give them the best, but you also don't want to make problems for yourself or put yourself in an uncomfortable position. But at the same time, if you see something, I'm of the opinion that saying it is more valuable to them overall than to just write 0 captures, 0 things, because if they don't find it, somebody else probably will. So, for example, if I go in and see as an inspector and see that there's droppings in this back corner, there's a spot of the food facility that hasn't been cleaned effectively, there's something gnawed, I always encourage folks to write that down, document it on the report. It doesn't provide any blame. It's not saying that, oh, you're doing a bad job cleaning, because, well, no, we're human and you just are pointing it out. But not saying something and having a health inspector or a customer find it instead is definitely the opposite of what we want to do. And I would hope that a lot of restaurants would take that to heart and be like, wow, okay, so even though I have 0 captures, we're going to, this will help us prevent future issues in the long run.
So
it's
how much?
Case, sorry, go on. I was going to say it's always a case, so you always feel like you're preaching to the converted, don't you? Because those who don't tend to not have you in. And as a general rule, I don't know if you found this when you're a consultant or not, but the people who ask for you in generally don't need you, do they? It's the ones that really need you just won't fucking pay, will they? Like, did you find that, Al, or not?
I did, and actually, what happened more often than not is the ones that did need me but didn't ask my advice, I ended up getting sent there anyway on behalf of their vendors and clients and people downstream for them who needed in it. So I turned up there anyway, but instead of being there to sort of like help with preventative action, it always ended up at that point being, almost, as you say, with EHO, it tends to be almost punitive action at that point when it's after the fact, when it's gone so bad, which is a bit of a shame because, as you say, those who need it don't realize that they do. And it kind of brings me on to a thought that I was just having then when you were talking, which is with your, we'll call them EHOs because I don't know what else to call them, but how much pest training is there within that framework? I mean, are you unique in the sense that you have a strong background in pest? Because in the UK, our EHOs, pests are part of their syllabus when they go through that process, but it's a very small part of that syllabus. It's like a module over a 3-year course, and so tends to get very much lost in the wash, and greater focus on a lot more things, and pests just a very small bit. And so we have, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Sean, like a very erratic level of support when it comes to EHOs. We've got some EHOs who listen, there's some EHOs who know quite well. They are very good. They do they do a good job. And then we have others that will come in and they will make the most ridiculous recommendations, absolutely fatuous, or in some cases, just almost, criminally wrong. And, it's such a, it's 4 hours. Yeah, I think it's literally is. It's about the same as your safe use or rodenticides at the end of the day. So what is it like in the States? I mean, are you the exception to the rule, or actually is it well supported throughout the industry?
I would say that there isn't a national standardized method of training for health inspectors. It's I am a registered sanitarian through a group called the National Environmental Health Association. So these are the folks that kind of create the REHS credential that I have is kind of the credential for a health inspector to have, because it encompasses a lot of different things that you'll encounter working in a public health department. So not just food safety, but also drinking water, wastewater, sewage disposal, housing code items and things like that. But pests really don't make up a big part of that. And so the training that I got predominantly was through conferences and then one-on-one training with the existing officers on my team who would take me out to shadow. Because before in the US, before you can be a health officer for a local town or city or county, you have to receive, training in a standardized way to meet the requirements set by the FDA. So if you're getting money, federal money, you're expected to maintain those FDA standards. So it's a certain number of hours of training, so many inspections before you're signed off and good to go. But pest control really does not make up a big chunk of that. And so you'll sometimes find inspectors, myself included, who I was let loose without understanding the difference between an American and a German cockroach. Or I got the training, but it was maybe on a passing slide or a passing online training, and I never saw them in person before starting to write violations. And so that can be challenging, especially if you're in an area where part of the country where maybe you don't have roof rats, or maybe you do, and then you move somewhere else and work somewhere else and you're exposed to pests you've never had before. So for example, being in Colorado, I had pretty much the same pests as I do here in Boston in terms of course, your Norway rat, your house mouse, your fruit fly, but there are other parts of the United States where you're more likely to find one species versus another, one species of cockroach versus another, and how you mitigate and prevent and treat them is so different. So it really does matter.
Yeah, a bit of me is glad that everyone seems to be having the same problems, but it's also quite worrying that we all seem to be having the same problem when it's so easily fixed. I mean, to come at this from another angle, but very much the same ethos. The first trade show I went to this week were one in Hanover, Eurotier, all about farming, big farming trade show. And the building that I was in, huge, so many stalls, disinfectants, cleaning, set up your cleaning regime, do this, do that, great big machines for scooping chickens off the floor, picking them up, plucking them so a human being need never get in contact with these. It's quicker, it's more effective. There's no contamination. There's no cross contamination. There's no beasties. Everything is clean. Everything is tidy. And then I'd pull some people off the walkway as they're walking past and be like, what are your thoughts on fly management? Relatively blank stares. You put all this work into creating an environment in there that has the same microbial aspect as the surface of the moon, and yet what are you doing about sort of like the flies potentially coming in from the stables next door, or the flies coming in from the poultry shed down there where all the chickens are? Nope, nothing. No thoughts whatsoever. It was almost an afterthought at that point that the thought that flies would be a vector of disease, not a thing. And it seems that people don't necessarily sort of like rationalize those two things together. EHOs and I need to have a better understanding of pests, farmers, and I have to have a better understanding of this. It's a problem, I think, and it's how do we fix that? How do we get around that?
I mean, I know one thing that really confused me and still confuses me to this day. So feel free to, I'm very curious about your thoughts, especially on the other side of the pond, so to speak, is that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is the organization responsible for writing the model food code. So this is the written restaurant, and they also, of course, oversee wholesale food manufacturing and other food production operations. And they classify the presence of pests, whether that's droppings, dead insects, dead mice, as basically the lowest tier of violation. They qualify it as a core. So there's kind of your core, your priority foundation, which are pretty, decently larger stuff. Like if if the hand sink you have to wash your hands doesn't have soap. And then the tallest is the priority violation. And that would be like if your giant grocery store walk-in refrigerator is broken, or you have someone show up to work while sick. So they really, it is wild to me, and it tells me a lot about their priority for these issues when seeing mouse droppings or live fruit flies or even a mouse inside an operation is the lowest tier of violation. And there's no standard definition for what constitutes a pest infestation.
That makes me think of something. I remember a while back, Sean, when we had Julie, the solicitor, on, and she was telling us that things like mice are not considered to be high-tier problems because someone, somewhere, some apocryphal story that had been told to some people, mice were not big vectors of diseases, and therefore, certainly not like rats. There's assumption that rats were the ones carrying leptospirosis. Rats were the ones doing all the disease transmission, and mice were a nuisance. They're going to chew through your bagels and they're going to poop in your cornflakes. It was deprioritized. What was it? That was in the housing regs, wasn't it, that we were talking about?
Yeah,
at the
it
time?
was. It was something to do with rats were classed as a grade 1 hazard, but mice were not. So
yeah,
I think they would look at doing actions against people with rat problems, but not necessarily with mice and And I was thinking, for us, I think they're as bad as each other. Does everyone agree with that or not?
I certainly do.
Well, I wouldn't need a restaurant if it had a rat or a mouse problem. I'm not good. So any mice, give us a taco. It's not happening. Is it?
Just ordering your food and you see something scurry past and be like, oh my God. Oh no, don't worry, it's just a mouse.
That's right, it's just a mouse. It's just a mouse. Keep eating, folks. It's fine.
I have to give the mice credit, though. In terms of what I would rather have in a building, I would definitely rather have a mouse. And in some cases, and we were talking about this earlier with the train station and the parrot sanctuary. There are some building designs and what they're used for that getting 0 mice is just never going to be a reality. And that's very difficult for some people to hear and live with. And I understand that, but it's just, you have to give the mouse credit for how it's been able to evolve over time and live so predominantly quietly alongside us, just capitalizing on all of our mistake after mistakes. So that's my take on it. But it's one of those things where it goes so fast, and especially in food facilities, from 0 to 100 in terms of, okay, I have a few mouse droppings, and now there's a viral video on TikTok of a rat in my bakery display case. In terms of just how fast that can go, because a rat in a food facility, universally, to every health inspector I've ever talked with, that is a serious offense and worthy of closure. No questions asked. So that's something that I always found interesting.
So very quickly, also go, Sean.
Just dwelling on it, when you're talking about how do you fix it, I've put a lot of thought into this when you're dealing with EHOs and stuff, and I don't think there is a solution, because you think, oh well, maybe you should have to go out with the pest controller, but then they will just tell you to do what that pest controller has done, and we all do it differently. So it's like, well, I saw this and this is a solution. You're like, that's because he told you. Do you know what I mean? So that you can't necessarily get them to go out with a pest controller, but then how do they have to have some sort of knowledge of pest control? Should they do the same CPD as us, Al?
So I'm going to say this. Yes, absolutely. They should do some CPD elements on this, because things change all the time. But what I always used to say when I was training is there's no one right way of doing this, but there are definitely wrong ways of doing it. And so realistically, as an EHO, you don't need to know all of the right ways of doing it. It's not necessarily their job to recommend the strategy that will work. They just need to identify the problems, and if what they are doing is legal, compliant, and effective. It's, you know, if they had the solution to solve the rats and the mice, then they should realistically be the pest manager solving the rats and the mice. That's, you know, not their right. And I think the problem comes about, as you say, is when you get those recommendations which are specific. You know, instead of saying you've got rats and mice, you need to sort this by so many days, it's when they're like, you need to put down glue boards, and you say, we can't put down glue boards anymore. And I saw this, you know, definitely when the Glue Boards Act came out, people dropping me messages saying, what do I do? The EHO's just come in and said I should use glue boards, but unfortunately we can't use glue boards in Wales at the moment. We can't use them anywhere around here. And so, you know, CPD absolutely keeps them up to date with those changes in legislation. But talking about solutions, and I do have to bring this up, you were telling me, so the pest management in the States, different, you have different tools, you have different chemicals, you have different options, but one of them that I found really fascinating, and I don't know if you talk about it, is this adoption through the States of using both carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Now, dioxide I understand, but carbon monoxide, that's baffling to me. But apparently you were telling me that it's a very well established and a very well used tool across a lot of the states in America at the moment.
It's definitely growing. And so while I was at Pest World, I had the pleasure of listening into more than a few talks where folks were mentioning that they're using it for a variety of mammals, including in Colorado, prairie dogs. I've seen it used on rats. But there's definitely a level of risk in using it, which is why, you know, you definitely want to maintain, you know, look up the requirements if there's any requirements in local legislation. But my success with it predominantly has been just because it's efficient and quick, and there's no residual lingering kind of impact on the broader ecosystem. So if something were to dig up a rat that was subjected to carbon monoxide treatment and eats it, there's no secondary impacts onto that animal, which is good. It's not, like I said, it's not without risk. It's carbon monoxide. So for, you know, it's odorless, colorless, but the machines that I've seen in use, and those are predominantly the Burrow RX machine, and the Cheetah.
The what machine?
The Burrow RX machine. And then there's the
Cheetah. Googling this now.
Well, what's nice about the Burrow RX is that it does have a component that tints the smoke. So it's kind of off-white. There's an odor to it. And so, you know, this is a technique that, you know, has worked exceptionally well for us. And what we always do is that anytime there are concerns about, you know, rats, like if the space is up next to a building or near an occupied human structure, my colleagues and I are on hand with air quality meters, and we go inside the building and we make sure there's no leakage. We make sure there's no breakthrough, for two reasons. Of course, the first one is, well, obviously we don't want a pathway into a space like that. And then the second is to make sure that the, you know, human health is maintained. So we have a very standardized process. I'm not sure how some other folks might do it, because I know those air gas meters can, you know, sometimes be more expensive than others, but I found it to be incredibly helpful. So that's
just for any of the pest controllers wondering, it's basically it's like a little fogger on a pair of wheels, roll it around, and I guess you put the tube down the burrow, stem up the burrows, and pump it full of carbon monoxide.
Yep. It's basically like the size of a lawnmower motor. It's not terribly complicated or loud. They're pretty easy to wheel around, and you just have to cover up the burrows with something. So some folks, I think, use like they'll fill them in manually. I've seen some folks use sandbags to great effect, and that just keeps rats from fleeing the the premises while you're trying to do the treatment.
Yeah, I imagine things like.
ice used? Sorry, Al. Have you ever seen dry ice used? I know Davey's on, and he said that they were using dry ice in was it in the parks in New York? I want to say that. But have you seen dry ice used?
I've seen it used, not very much, just because I find it's just not something that we've been doing. I think there's merit in it, and it is a product I believe that's EPA regulated, so the Environmental Protection Agency regulates it. So if you're going to use it for the purposes of pest control, you have to use the product that's EPA regulated. I can't just go buy dry ice from the grocery store and do it. Well, maybe on my own property, but that's ill-advised. And I thankfully don't have any rats in my home yet. But I've seen it used. It's the dosing question for me that makes me more hesitant to implement it, just because I'm not sure how big the burrow system is, and I would rather not play at the guesswork. My gas meter allows me to attach a hose, and so I can put the hose in, if I had the inclination, into the burrow system as well and get a measurement of what the concentration of carbon monoxide is. But I can't do that so well with the dry ice.
Right.
Carbon dioxide does also do this very funny thing, which is it creates this carbolic acid phenomenon in nasal tracts. So it's the same thing as when you open up a can of Coke or you open up a bottle of fizzy, and you take a snootful of the vapor coming off that, and you feel that fizzing at the back of your nose. It's basically a chemical reaction, basically a very minor chemical reaction, acidic reaction to the mucous membranes in your nose, which warns you. Bad news. Carbon dioxide is generally considered to be bad news. It shows that there's not enough oxygen, because this is the strange. This is why carbon dioxide and nitrogen and what have you just seen? Sean? What are you looking at?
Just looking at the Burrow RX website, and it's got treating like a professional, and the 3 pictures are the cutest animals you've ever seen in your life. It's a little squirrel, like a little prairie dog or a fucking whatever it is, like
or a
ground
pocket
squirrel.
gopher.
And an armadillo, which in this country we probably think they're pangolins and are endangered, but obviously is a guessing them. It's not like rats and things. They pick possibly the cutest animals you could ever imagine in your life on how to treat them like a professional. I was thinking, I love America because in this country that have a shit fit over that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, now I wish you hadn't seen those photos, because that's always funny to me, because again, like being in Colorado, you get prairie dogs, and to most people they're adorable. We actually, even working at the health department, we had a couple instances where people were saving them by taking about 120 of them and stuffing them in their garage. It's basically just hoarding them. But they're like, they're so cute, I can't let them die. It's like, I understand that, but ma'am, you now have a lot of prairie dogs in your home, and I don't think you understand what that means.
I don't think people quite understand as well. Prairie dogs in the US are one of the biggest reservoirs for bubonic plague still, aren't they? Prairie dogs and the fleas on them. There was a study that came out that there's still a lot of Yersinia pestis kicking around in prairie dogs. And there was only someone, what was it, last year? Was it in Texas or somewhere nearby that's died as a result of one of the first developed world deaths of bubonic plague in a long time, and it was mad.
They can carry the fleas, that the fleas themselves have the Yersinia pestis pathogen, and it's definitely not something that's totally uncommon in around the summertime in Colorado. It's you may get 1 or 2 counties that start putting up plague warnings. And there are several different types of plague as well. So you have your bubonic plague, which has the pustules that everyone has heard about. Yeah, the buos. And then years ago, I worked following a case of pneumonic plague, which is far deadlier and unfortunately presents initially as something respiratory. It presents very chest kind of respiratory symptoms, and so you think you have a cold until it's very, very late in the game. And there was a young individual who did die at the time in Colorado because of it's suspected that their family pet came into close contact with the prairie dog, got the and transmitted the disease onto the person. So it's very sad. And they do pose a risk, not only from a disease perspective, but also from from a farming perspective, in terms of if you have a big cow herd and you have lots and lots of prairie dog holes and your cow steps in one, breaks its leg, you're out financially quite a bit. So they're cute, and they're in zoos all over the US too. This does not make any sense to a lot of people in Colorado in the West, but on the East Coast, we're like, yeah, look at these cute prairie dogs. We have them on display at the zoo, like 15 minutes from me. It's hilarious, the juxtaposition.
You were saying that London Zoo had a big enclosure with brown rats in it for a while, and that was very cool. They had like the big mocked-up pirate ship and stuff in there for them to run over. But did you not see? Have you been to London Zoo, Sean?
I have, yeah. I didn't see the rats. I would, yeah. To be fair, I would love to see that. Tell you what I was thinking though. The bubonic plague, wasn't that spread by black rats? I was never good at school, and history wasn't my number one thing. So, are you getting a double whammy of prairie dogs and black rats? And is that something which is affecting your commercial premises where the black rats are or not?
Good question. So I don't have any prairie dogs out here on the East Coast, but we definitely have rats. And Boston in particular, much like New York, is engaging in a couple different strategies to mitigate the rat activity. In Colorado, it's a very different environment. So you have I didn't really see a lot of overlap between the prairie dogs and the rats themselves. The rats predominantly kept to the more urban areas, city properties like Denver, but thanks to, urban sprawl and kind of urbanization of the wild prairie landscapes, you are seeing more and more prairie dogs kind of in suburbia or right next to it. So there is more potential for those kind of interactions to start happening. So we'll see. But
I mean, it's the interactions, I think, that gave the black rats a bad name. So if you've ever looked at the life cycle of plague rat and then ultimately human beings, it's a really weird one, because most pathogens don't electively want to kill their hosts. But Yersinia pestis is a weird one because it kills both of its hosts and it bounces between them. So when it's in the flea, it will basically feed on the blood in the foregut, gets to a certain number, and then it will start to sort of exude back out of the foregut through the esophagus, gluing the esophagus up as it goes. So the flea goes into a biting frenzy. It can't eat, so it just bites and bites and bites, depositing as many of these plague bacterium as it goes. And then it gets into the blood of the rat or the prairie dog, and it just multiplies in the blood. It's blood-borne. It basically feeds on the blood. And as soon as it gets so many, then they start to bump into each other enough that the number of bacterium within the blood is sufficiently high. They create this chemical called Yersinia murine toxin, which destabilizes.
How do you know this shit? How do you fucking know this shit? Like, what do you?
It's fascinating. But
he's a nerd. Just accept it.
I'm so glad you said nerd. There were so many other names we could have called me then, and they would have probably all been correct in some.
Sorry, Al, I cut you off there, but Adam Edwards is absolutely right. It's incredible. So there's so many that they bump into each other so much they produce that chemical that I've just forgot the name of.
Yersinia murine toxin, which basically stops their heart. It gives them a heart attack. But the thing is, if you're a black rat or a prairie dog and you have a heart attack, you're generally on the ground, and so pop, you don't do a thing. But if you're a black rat in a roof or a roof space, if you have a heart attack when you are running along a beam, gravity becomes your co-pilot and you tend to come hurtling to the floor, usually, on the dinner table or where someone sat. And what do the fleas do then? They jump onto the first warm-blooded animal. So that's why black rats got such a bad rap for the plague, because you'd have something come hurtling out the top of your house, land on your dinner table, and lo and behold, a week later, everybody's plagued up. So, people just made that fairly logical, if not illogical assumption that it was the black rats, but it's shown that a lot of rodents will be able to carry them, and a couple other species as well, actually, where you find Yersinia pestis occurring as well,
Bats.
which is
Bats carry it, don't they?
I'm going to be honest with you, bats carry everything. I think when sort of like the Garden of Eden existed, bats made a pact very early on with the devil that they will host every disease under the sun, with the exception that it won't affect them. They're literally pathogens, carriers, vectors for so many viruses and diseases, and they don't give a shit. They're absolutely fine. It doesn't seem to affect them at all. It was why actually they're used a lot in labs to study how they can be not as asymptomatic carriers of disease, because it doesn't really factor in. It's fascinating.
I think working with bats at the zoo I was in was just one of the most surreal experiences. When you're working with a colony of bats and you know that they're healthy and not going to give you rabies, it's a very interesting experience because you get very up close and personal with how they move. And to this day, I absolutely love bats. I have a great respect for them as an animal. I love them, even though yes, they will carry everything, and they don't care if they infect me with anything.
I've got a good question for you. I like this one. I'll give us the example of the best job or the best work you've seen done by pest control, and then the worst.
Oh, the best. Let's see. I have the worst readily available, and this was from my time.
Because that's what I want to hear.
My time in Colorado. So this is definitely the worst. So I had rule number 1: never do an inspection on a Friday afternoon. I think we all know that, because you're never going to have a good time. Something is going to go absolutely backwards on you, and up is down, day is night, your day is ruined. And to make it worse, I had a student who was doing their public health nursing student who was doing their public health rotation with me. And I asked her that day, it was like 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon just outside of Denver. And I said, like, okay, do you want to do a corporate restaurant, or do you want to do this dive bar that I've been putting off for 3 weeks? And she's like, dive bar. I was like, okay, let's go. So I go in there and immediately regret everything I've ever said or done. And I was so tempted to turn around and go. And basically, long story short, I had over 500 living and dead American and German cockroaches in this dive bar. They were in the salt shakers. They were in the bar well. They were the first step I took into the kitchen, because I can say 500 because I stood there and counted, because I knew, I was like, if this goes to court, if this goes on public record, which my reports at the time were public record, I want to be darn sure that I'm putting a number that is 100% accurate. And so I stepped on the floor tile, and about a dozen roaches scurried out. And then I put my foot up and I put my foot down again, and a bunch more came out. And this poor nursing student was just the absolute bravest. I should have hired her on the spot. She was just brave as anything, and was with me the whole time. And so we get to the worst part of the situation, which is the bar owner, absolutely nonplussed by everything I've been seeing, saying, has absolutely no interest in what I'm doing there until I say the word close. Like, I'm going to ask you to close. And in a similar vein, this is also the first and only place I've ever seen nacho cheese, the kind that you might get from an American gas station. I've seen that go bad in this same place. Didn't think that was possible, because it's basically just oil, but it can go bad. So she calls up her pest control vendor, it's not a company I've ever heard of before. I had absolutely no idea who this person was. They didn't have any accounts in my inspection area that I heard of. So I was a little skeptical, but he was licensed. Okay. And basically, all the three of us agreed that, yes, they have to close. They have to close now. they, a big cleaning effort has to go underway. And I was like, okay, well, what are you planning to do with all these roaches? And he's like, well, I got these bug bombs from Home Depot. And I was like, I don't think that's going to work out. I don't think that's going to do it the way you think you're. It was a very difficult position. Because I basically had to hand it over to my supervisor at the time because, closing someone down on a Friday is very difficult. And, and it was, I had to leave eventually, and he was licensed, and it was a hot mess in terms of getting them to reopen, just because I was like, please don't use the Home Depot stuff. Use anything but the Home Depot stuff. I will do anything to keep you from using the over-the-counter, it was a hot mess. So that was the worst one ever. For sure.
Oh, wow.
Best one?
The best one. I gotta say, I haven't had the so at Harvard we have 5 absolutely fabulous vendors that treat our campus like their own homes, which is fantastic. And I have to say that all of them have managed to surpass my expectations in some way or another with how they exclude something and then how they talk to people. And I always really love that. So for example, we had a company recently do some mouse exclusion in one of our buildings. And it was just such a beautiful job, and it looked so good, and it maintained super well because they were using excluder. And it was a tough spot. I mean, we have, we're a university with very old buildings, and there's a lot of historical significance in how they appear. And so I can't just, rip a wall out and ask them to, ask folks to be cool with it. So it's, how we do that is almost an art form. And at Pest World, there were a lot of folks talking about metal bending and exclusion work and doing all of that. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, thank goodness we've already hired people who do this on a regular basis. It is such a game changer when you have folks doing exclusion work outside. So for example, we had another example is we had a spot, an elevated flower bed. And technically this was before my time at Harvard, but I absolutely loved what they did with it. So rats were undermining this flower bed and killing the bushes. It looked ugly. It wasn't very good. And so the pest control vendor cut kind of we had a sheet of excluder fabric that we put holes in to allow the plant roots to go through. And then we covered it with this couple inches of 1.5-inch sharp-sided stone. And it looks so much better because the rats can't get into it. And you have the beautiful flowering bushes every spring, and the rocks are this off-white, and they're really pretty, and it matches the building stone. So it just looks good. And so and I'm not an aesthetic person. I can't make things look good. So just having someone else be able to do that is such a huge win.
Yeah. But proofing is an art, and Sean will back me up with it. But anyone can do proofing. It's it's the exclusion of one animal from one environment to another. But to make it look good, to make it last, to make it look as though it's not even there in the first place. There's some real craftsmen out there. I've seen some really excellent proofing and exclusion work done. And I think, what's your expression, Sean? Tight lines. It's all about. It's really good when you get that, especially with bird netting and stuff like that, when it just looks geometric and it's good.
It is something that I think as an industry we struggle with, isn't it? Because we want to be seen as professional, but often a lot of the proofing work that we do, although functional, does not look professional, does it? If you just push some wire wool into a wall, the first thing the customer thinks is, I could have done that. Do you know what I mean? If you're just going to put something over and put 4 plugs in and stick it on, I could have done that. And proofing, if you get someone who's good at proofing, they're worth their weight in gold, aren't they? It's funny as you say that, you're talking about that bed of stone and all that. There's a lot of hard work and effort goes into that. But if you get that right, you are head and shoulders above the competition, aren't you? Because they can't see a clean vape box. They can't see your the service users don't see your treatment reports every week or blah blah blah, but they do see that big bed, don't they? They do see you doing that. It is a notable feather in your cap, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Even just for the before and after pictures. I mean, like if you could see what some of the projects that we've done over that my colleagues and I have done over the years, it's such a game changer in terms of how much better it looks, and couple that with like securing waste and moving, getting better rodent proof trash bins like that. It looks so much better than it used to. So that's
I mean,
always
so
been.
I've got a question now, which is kind of like leading on from this. We're talking about, from the past to now, comparing A to B. Let's take the other way, not looking back and where we are now. What do you think, with your special perspective, from where you are, from your job, and from the institute that you sit in, where do you see the future of pest management going in the States? How do you, because it's changing quite a lot. There's a lot of different forces at play out there. There's a lot of voices to be heard. And how do you think it's going to go over the next sort of like 5 to 10 years? What would be your prediction on the face of pest management in the States?
That's a good question. I would say that what's really going to start taking off are smart traps, remote monitoring, having more data collection, and data collection is something that pest control has always done. We caught one rat in this corner on this day, we pulled it. But we'll start having more hard and fast evidence in terms of how many visits did the station get in a week? When were the visits? Oh, weird. All of them are right before, or there's no visits on trash day. There might be a problem with securing trash. Similarly for, and there were some excellent companies at Pest World who are offering these sorts of products. Do I think all of them are ready for prime time? Probably not. I think there's always going to be something coming out newer, a better update, a better model. And so that's going to continue to grow and develop over the next couple of years as well. But I think there's some excellent opportunity for taking time out of a pest control inspection where we're checking the traps and doing the physical legwork of that, and instead letting that fall into the hands of kind of a software of a program. So folks have more free time to do more of this prevention discussion with have more face time with your customers, talk about things that maybe you can't control but can recommend changes for. So like the cleaning, the trash securement, fixes to a building foundation, things of that nature that really will impact you in the future if they're not taken care of, without having to, you're still working. It's still something that needs to happen, but that's where I see it going.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Anyone who's ever listened to me think that I definitely am all in favor of the smart revolution, let's say, and I'm more, I definitely want to try and point out that with the smart technology thing, I think a lot of people have fallen into the mindset that it has to be one or the other. You have to be fully engaged with smart or you don't engage with it at all. But actually, there is a really good overlap where traditional methods of control and smart technology overlap. And then that little sweet spot in the middle actually is where you get the most value. When you have a program that uses all of these conventional methods of control, but you augment that control with that data, because the data means something at the point. And it's exactly as you say, we generate so much data in our industry. Every time you open up a box, data, what's eaten it, when has it been eaten, between then and how much has been eaten, what other animals are in the box, what's the environment around the box. You internalize all that data, and then what do you write? Take on box 23, on to the next one. Oh, what have we done? Like, we have so much data. What we're really bad at is we're not a data poor industry. What we're bad at as an industry is data capture. And now we have tools that will capture that data for us. And now we not need to work on communicating that data, because it's all well and good having a table saying, right, 23, 15th of the 11th, hit on box number 5 at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 9 o'clock. That doesn't mean anything to anyone. But you put that on a graph, or you put that on a heat map, suddenly you can sell that, or more importantly, you can get people to buy into your program, their changes. So yeah, I'm really glad you said smart technology, because I think it's going to be a big thing.
And there's some things that are never going to, or that won't have an immediate smart component that we can utilize. So I know Hugh mentioned in the chat bed bugs. In the event that I get a call about a complaint or a bed bug complaint, obviously the first thing I want to do is make sure that we have the identity of whatever is causing the problem, because there could be a lot of different things going on. And so there's no other substitute for me than a glue board. That is the most simple and straightforward way to try and capture an insect that is moving along like that. There were some interesting folks at Pest World who are doing kind of more, I'd say, for more museums or more like long-term situations, not so much complaint-based, where they have a glue trap for flying insects, and it has a camera and an AI component to identify different species. Looks very promising. I still think it needs some of them need a little work.
That was the Pelsis and Brandenburg device, wasn't it? I seem to remember.
I believe so. There was also one from Osaka that had that too. So it was, and it looks, they look amazing, and I'm very excited about it. I just, I don't see that being something I would use to respond to a residential complaint. I think it would be wonderful in some of our museum spaces or spaces where we have very sensitive customers in terms of, one moth is too many moths, or one fly is too many flies. So that would be great. But for some of that, we'll never totally get rid of some of the dumb technology.
I personally think that the smart traps won't take off. I think all it takes is someone to create a camera with that AI technology you're talking about. Because we put a camera in on one of our farms to look at the rats in the way they interacted with the boxes. And as Al says about data, the data which we received outside of the rats was phenomenal. There was birds of prey turning up, there was hedgehogs, there was all sorts of things, and it gave you this massive overview. So if you had an AI camera, because a box is very binary, isn't it? We had 10 visits this month, but it doesn't tell you what went around the outside. It doesn't tell you what didn't go in. It doesn't tell you what's happening outside of it. And I think pest controllers would probably pick up AI camera technology a lot better, because they wouldn't feel like they're being replaced. They would probably look at it as them then interpreting the data, because they're not good at collecting it, but we are good at interpreting it, I would say, when we get it. Do you agree, Al, or not?
Yeah. Oh, no,
Just
absolutely. Yeah, and we do it all the time. You open up a box and instantly you know what's happened in there. You've got a good idea. And I think we need to make this big distinction between smart technology and then, smart boxes or smart traps or smart technology encompasses, as you say, cameras, AI, all of these things. They all are smart technology. Even the phone, even your software app is technically soft. They're like smart technology. It is so I think the definition of IoT or smart technology is any platform or device that allows you to interact or sort of like collect and interpret data, or it's something along the lines of that. It's a tool for being able to act on data or to respond to data or something. Someone's going to have to look it up for me, but it is very similar to that. So a lot of what we do, we're already integrated with smart technology, but we don't really appreciate it, because you think smart technology is the trap that goes bang and your phone that goes ping, but it is your cameras, isn't it? And it's your smart software.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. Do you think if AHOs started using cameras, Reolinks, etc., and that smart technology, there would be more premises shut down than there is at the minute?
Depends on who gets to see it. If the health
I know, but
inspectors
I'm
see it.
just thinking. So, like, it's easy in it. You find like 10 pieces of mouse shit in the corner, and you think, oh yeah, they'll get that under control, and they probably would. But when you put a camera in and you've got that shown down, all of a sudden you've got a mouse running through there every 10 minutes, and you're like, there's not one. There's like, do you think we'd start to see more premises shut down and more stringent regulations on those businesses and more of an uptake of people needing it? Because if the AHO comes in and puts a camera in, business owners are going to shit their pants. Because what happens, I don't know what happens over there, but what happens over here is invariably we get a call saying, AHO's been in, he shut us down. We've got these 10 points to do. 9 of them are like, clean this up, do this, do that. And one of them is be pest free. So in 24 hours, he does 9. And then he rings you up and he goes, yeah, can you have me paper to say I'm pest free now? And you're like, yeah, you're not, mate. It's going to take a little while. And he's like, no, I need to open. And you're like, no, you've been shut down because you've got mice. Yeah, but you're in. And so if the AHO puts a camera in, that then gives them the binary yes or no, doesn't it?
I think it can. I mean, there's definitely, and I'm gonna gloss over any and all like privacy and union stuff just because there's definitely that component too when you put cameras in. But there's also the you can also put them at feet level and you don't have the identifying information that way. But unless someone's got really nice shoes that you can identify a mile away. But yeah, I think I think that would force kind of the food safety authorities and regulators to kind of go back and have those discussions about what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. Is one too many? What defines an infestation, and what does not? Because as I mentioned earlier, there is no hard and fast number or criterion that a health officer here in the United States can point to and be like, that is what an infestation looks like. Obviously, my 500 cockroaches, yeah, that's definitely an infestation. I had absolutely no problem making that argument to my supervisor at the time. But what if it were only 50? What if it were 25? It's such a big difference in terms of, being able to demonstrate an acute risk of a foodborne illness or injury or harm to customers. And that's kind of where it is. So if you have a mouse and it's getting into maybe the waste bin or like the compost bucket at a coffee shop, is that mouse an acute hazard to human health? Some would argue yes, some would argue no. And it's a difficult conversation, but it has to happen at some point. And this might bring it to a head.
It's funny, isn't it, how we've only ever thought about smart technologies being used by pest controllers, but I guess there's AHOs or even maybe see a few.
No.
Would your consultants start to put them in independent, Alex?
Smart technology, we are really late the pest management industry is a really, really late adopter to smart technology. So I'll tell you one terrifying thing. I went to an FM show beginning of last year, and what they did is everyone who walked into that show in the Excel Center, their face was scanned. You signed a bit of paper when you got your ticket saying you will be recorded. There are cameras here. You walk around. And they scanned your face, and there was a whole load of cameras on turrets, Big Brother style, and they figured out every stall that you went to, and judging by the length of time you spent at the stall, the company then basically sent you a portfolio of, here are the stalls that you missed that we thought you would quite like, or it was something along the lines of that. Smart technology is really well embedded. We are basically so far behind in the pest management industry. So many other industries have become so data greedy, so data rich, that we're really missing a trick. And yeah, I mean, if I could, I would absolutely. When I was a consultant, more data the better. The more we could have captured, the better. There are some out there. They're very simple devices. They're little PIR sensors that you can stick on things. But imagine with that, you don't need to, the knee-jerk reaction is you stick it in a box. But why stick it in a box when you can just stick it underneath a kick, like a kitchen kick help me out here? The space underneath your kitchen sink, behind the kickboards.
Oh, the kick
You can
plate.
get kick plate. Yes, there we go. Pull your kick plate off. Put one of these hockey puck devices underneath there, because ostensibly nothing should be moving under there. So anytime that pings off, you've got movement under there. You don't have to have a camera. You don't have to worry about sort of like confidentiality. You don't have to worry about people's conversations or what shoes they're wearing. No, if that little hockey puck screams something's moving next to me in that roof space, in that floor space, brilliant, I come out, because it's going to be something, and where there should be nothing. Yeah, I I think it's great. I think the more we think about it, the more we will find uses for it in what we do. And it's going to be really good fun. Yeah, I can see the cogs ticking over there, Sean. What was
Yeah, no,
just
I'm just thinking. So it's almost the answer to the question, isn't it? Because if AHOs had them and we had them, you turn up and the AHO says there's a hole up there, 2/3 of the way up the wall, and I think the rats are getting in through there, and you're like, it's not. I know it's not. I think I can see some smear marks around it, and you're like, it's not. I guarantee it's not. I think it's a drainage issue. And say the AHO isn't that up to date with, hasn't done the CPD. They can put a camera on the hole, and you can put one in the manhole. You will soon find out what's going on, won't you?
Literally, it'll become a betting event, won't it?
True. I mean, like, again, if it were me, I would just try and see if I can get my head up there in terms of finding droppings or any sort of rub marks or anything, even if I can get up into the ceiling, the ceiling space and see if anyone's waving at me.
Mary, you're thinking about you. I'm thinking about it. We deal with, and to be fair, we deal with lots of different councils, and the variation between them is phenomenal. We've got ones that I would go to for advice because you're like, they know the shit. And usually they don't ever tell you what to do. They just go, yeah, there's rats there, and they know the answers. They don't need to sort of bang their chest about it. And then there's other ones that just come up with the most outrageous shit you've ever heard in your life. And you're like, that's not gonna fucking help. Like, that's never gonna help. But yeah,
it makes me feel like there should be more crossover, but in like conferences and trainings and things like that, personally. I apologize, Sean, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. But you're right. The only EHOs that we tend to see are those that actively engage with our community, and they tend to be the good ones because they actively engage. There's a handful of them that you'll see down at the pest shows. You get a couple of them turning up the regionals, a couple of them on the forums. There's one or two actually that listen to the podcast and comment every so often. But they're the ones that engage. The ones that don't engage, how do you even start that conversation? Because they don't want to. It's not on their radar. It's not high up on their agenda, or they simply assume that they know everything because it's pest management. What's there to know? They're rats, they're mice, they're cockroaches. How complicated can it be?
Do your EHOs have like conferences out there, like pest? Do they have a pest world for EHOs?
Oh yeah. So there's a national group called NACHO, which is the National Association of City and County Health Officials. So these are all of the inspectors for them. There's the NEHA, which is the credentialing group, the National Environmental Health Association. And then there's almost always state and a state group that has health officers among their ranks. So they are out there. Actually, a dear friend of mine, Dave Power, is, if not now, then just finished a talk at one of the conferences here in Massachusetts, and he was talking about rats today to a bunch of health inspectors. So I'm really hoping that they're listening and giving him and learning something from him, because Dave is a city official with Cambridge, and he works with rats on a regular basis, but he's not doing restaurant inspections, but talking to the folks who are. So hopefully they're, am I a Niha or a Nacho? Definitely more of a Nacho fan. But yeah, no, there's opportunities, but it's very disjointed. Like there's not and of course you got to pay to go to the conferences. So if your department can't pay, or they only send one person or a team, then you miss a lot of folks, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just the same. I mean, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but we have the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health in the UK, and that's who all of our EHOs are attached to, I believe. And they run each year a pest conference, the CIEH pest conference, and I will sign up to it each year. But the thing is there must be thousands of EHOs in the UK, and there definitely are not thousands of EHOs signed up to this conference on pests. So once again, it becomes almost an echo chamber, doesn't it? Where the ones who want to know do, but then again, the ones who we need to know don't do it.
That and like pest control, it's also a tough industry. It's nobody when things are going great, nobody feels like they need you. When there's no outbreak of E. coli, McDonald's here in the United States, we've had a lot of cases of E. coli with McDonald's right now, tied to the onions.
Yeah, the onions, wasn't it?
It is the onions,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So it's a humongous outbreak, and that's what a lot of health departments are spending their time doing, and the FDA and the USDA. It's a big mess. And it's like when you have those sorts of instances, you get a lot of time. There's just so much that goes on with those sorts of cases. But what I'm trying to say is that it's a tough industry to be in. There can be a lot of burnout. There can be a lot of people who work for a health department for a couple of years and move on. I mean, that's what I ended up doing. Or you get folks who are very, set in their ways, and they're there for a long time, and they have amazing institutional knowledge, but they may no longer go to the conferences because they either send their younger staff, or they feel like, we're all set. I know my community. I'm good to go. I don't need to go to these things anymore. So it's hard.
It's funny though, isn't it? It's funny though how, as an industry, like over the course of this evening, we think, why don't they come out with pest controllers? Why don't they? But then I've never, and this is what I love about doing this podcast. It changes your thought process, because I think, why have I never asked one of the AHOs if my lad can shadow them for a week to understand where they're at?
I was literally just thinking the same thing then, which is, we all sit here, and I felt myself doing it. Everyone needs to take us more seriously. But when was the last time that we went out with a builder to understand how buildings were built? When was the last time, and why they don't, factor in pests? Why was the last time we went out with an EHO? Hi, Dave. You a little bit late into the show. 4 minutes left.
If we went down to their conference. Imagine if you went down to the AHO's conference, whatever that is in this country, where you went down. Imagine the shit you'd find out that would be useful and pertinent to what we do. I bet you would find out more useful and pertinent information at that than you do at the pest control show, because you probably know 99% of the pest chat stuff. You're picking up the ones and twos. You got the AHO stuff. I bet you'd know 10%.
Brand new and shiny, isn't it? Yeah.
You would just soak it up, wouldn't you?
I mean, a lot of health departments, at least that I know, if you ask politely for, and are doing it for an educational purpose, I don't think many would object to a ride-along situation. I mean, again, I mentioned I had nursing students who used to go with me when I was in Colorado, and I even here at Harvard, I often invite people to walk with me, especially if it's near a spot. So, like I'll call him a compatriot, a brother in arms, Dave Power. Sometimes when we have a facility or where there's a neighboring property and it's just a tough situation to navigate with a pest or with other issues like maintaining trash, we'll just bring in everyone and just invite lots of people and try and get these ideas sourced out in terms of, okay, what do you know that could help with this? What do you know that could help with this? And it's definitely cumbersome trying to align schedules and do all of that, but it's so helpful when you just get enough people in the room who know about this versus that versus the other thing to just get that kind of, I'm blanking on the term of just a mind meld of what needs to get done.
Yeah, and this kind of so I've got a bit of a follow. You're talking about collaboration and sort of like, but you've mentioned before a couple of times, you've had students following you around, you've had, proteges. So when we come to a bit of, because we're coming up to the 1 hour 30 mark, so just like your last thoughts on how do we, or not how do we get new people in the industry? What would be the advice you would give anyone who's listening to this, who's considering a career either as an EHO or as sort of like a food hygiene analyst or a pest controller? What's the best better advice from your route to this that you could give a young person coming into this industry?
I would say just keep an open mind. Don't let yourself be blinded by any, bias that you might have in terms of, oh, I wouldn't want to work with cockroaches because they're gross, or I don't want to be a health inspector because I don't like confrontation, or I don't like, having kind of that sort of position. And I don't advise that people keep those kind of, everyone is so different in both of our fields and it's an amazing job. It's being able to work outside, problem solving. You're never having the same day. You're never bored, for better or worse. And it's just a phenomenal social engagement. It's perfect for it's a perfect job for extroverts. We're always talking to somebody. We're always fixing problems, and we can make people's days a little better as an EHO or in pest control.
Absolutely. I think that's the big thing, isn't it? You got to keep an open mind when you come in. There's so many preconceptions for both of those industries that it's dirty, it's low skilled, it's just done by those who maybe not have had other choices. No, it's a fantastic industry. If I could choose it all again, I would have definitely chosen to come into this industry again, even having done all of the horrible standing in farms up to my knees in pig and cow poop. Absolutely. Oh, awesome stuff. So I mean that's bringing us up to very neatly up to the 1 hour 30 mark. So Sean, do you want to take us away with the first question?
Yeah, stay there, see if I can. Oh, he's done it for us. Have you enjoyed the time on the podcast?
Me? Very much so.
Yeah, have you enjoyed
No, I had an absolute blast. It was again, super honored to be here, and I love talking shop with everybody. And obviously, anytime folks want to talk about pest control or food safety or any of it, I am always up and willing and able to do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'll bring us on to the next one. I might ask two variants of this. I mean, number one, you mentioned, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. You mentioned before we started that there's a couple of people who watch this that personally. So would you like to give any big shout outs to anyone watching this, particularly at the moment?
I think both my parents are watching, so hi mom, hi dad. And I believe my colleague Dr. Rich Pollack is on. It might be listening as well, if not now. And my supervisor and colleagues Cynthia Peranto and Allie Littlefield. So I have the privilege of working with a fantastic team who I learned from, and who, whenever I mess up, help me learn from it and make myself better every time. So I'm very lucky to have them.
Oh, awesome. And so that leads then into the shameless plug. So give us a shameless plug. The thing that if you'd want all pest managers or EHOs to do tomorrow or to buy tomorrow, what would it be? What would be the one thing you asked of them all?
I'd say, in the spirit of camaraderie and community, if you are working in pest control or if you're working as a health department, reach out to each other, try and learn from each other. Ask if you can do a ride along, ask if you can attend, if there's any public meetings or any sort of way to get involved in this community, so we can all kind of learn from each other and work a little closer together. Because again, it's never fun to try fighting a fire when we both show up with buckets and we thought the other person was bringing the fire truck. So better to just start now and build those relationships early.
I mean, actually, I think that's one of the best plugs that we've probably had so far. It's right up my street. So thank you for that one. And finally, Sean, last one.
Yeah. Go on then. You can say one or more, But if you would like to see anyone or any number of people on here, who would you pick to be a good guest?
Oh, I would, again, shameless Harvard plug, but Dr. Rich Pollack for sure.
Yes,
His background
yes.
in entomology alone is absolutely fascinating. I don't know if you've had the privilege to read some of his papers, and he's done some bits, especially with lice, and he's done some more, definitely more talking in terms of public speaking than I. But he's absolutely fabulous. And if you are ever need something to read, I recommend his work very much.
I was about to say, I follow him on LinkedIn. He does a lot of very, very good educational posts on LinkedIn. So if you're watching this on my LinkedIn stream at the moment, or you guys have a LinkedIn as you're watching it, find him on there, because he's constantly posting up some really interesting stuff, and also a lot of situational stuff as well. It's not just me who tends to ramble on. There's always and there we go. I've not had an opportunity to actually listen to him speak, so I must try and find an opportunity for that at some point. But
And his
there we
sense
go.
of humor is very, very funny. I nearly spit out my coffee almost every time I talk to him in the morning, because he's just very funny.
Oh, excellent stuff. Mary Kate, thank you ever so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you on tonight, and there's been some really good feedback. I think everyone's been absolutely riveted. There's likes coming in left, right, and centre, and the questions have just mostly been in awe. So thank you ever so much for coming on. And next time in the UK, you owe me that coffee, and we owe you a T-shirt. So we'll definitely have to meet up.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend.
Lovely stuff.
Have a nice night.
Catch you later.
God bless.
Bye bye.
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 Oh, hang on, I'm pressing the wrong things, guys. Oh, well, let's see how this goes. Bye.
Welcome to Beauties and Beasties, the independent pest podcast for the UK.